Okay, so I want to look really quick right now at just the difference between passive voice and active voice. And it's really easy to fall into passive voice, especially in our methods section, but we really want to make sure that we're using active voice. And the difference really is going to make things much more clear when they're in active voice. We're going to be able to see who's doing what. And especially in our methods section, we know how important it is to be very specific. And so knowing who's taking what action at what time is going to really help the clarity of our methods section. And so I have this methods section here, which is kind of typical for what we might write. And so we're going to see that some of this is in active voice, but a lot of it's in passive voice. And I'm going to give a couple of examples quick on how to change that. So this first sentence, we have 300 high school students participated in the experiment. This is fine. This is an active voice. We know who's participating. We have our verb participated. 300 high school students are the ones who participated. Next sentence. All students were selected based on previous reports of disruptive classroom behavior. And so here we have this word were, and this is really one of the key words that we're going to look for in identifying passive voice. And so all students were selected. So the students were selected. Selection is what's happened to the students, but we don't know who selected them, essentially. And again, in our method section, it might be important in considering who selected them. Was it the experimenters? Were they selected by other students, by a teacher? And in the context of our study, this might make things less clear. And so I can reword this, for instance, as just kind of change this. And I can say the research team selected the students based on previous reports of disruptive classroom behavior. This is going to make it much more clear. Now we know who selected the students. I know sometimes it's uncomfortable to say I in a paper, but that's totally okay to say I or we. But if you want to use something like the research team, that might sound a little more professional, a little more official, if that sounds better to your ear. It also would be okay to say something like selection criteria included previous reports of disruptive classroom behavior. And so this is just another way of not using passive voice, but showing, and it would be clear that the selection criteria, it'd be at least a little bit clearer that that was set by the experimenters. So then I'll move over here. They were randomly assigned to one of 3 sections. And again, they were randomly assigned. These people were randomly assigned, but we don't know who did that random assignment. And so again, I can change this up. And even they, not a passive voice thing, but saying they could be sometimes unclear. As we go through this passage, if we continued, we'd see that there's students here, there's teachers here. And so saying they, we can be a little more specific here too. And so we can say the research team randomly assigned the students to one of 3 sections. And so again, making these little changes, we automatically now know who's taking the action, and we can continue through this paragraph. I'll stop here, but we can continue through this paragraph. And again, look for things like were given, or were selected. Things like that are what we're talking about when we're talking about passive voice. And usually we're seeing what's happening, that whoever's in that sentence that's being named, they're the object of our sentence, not our subject. And so we want to make that subject overt. The research team did this. The participants did that. And so changing those passive voice constructions for active voice.